Under the frost-kissed moon, a single drop of blood froze into a ruby pendant, whispering of bonds that shatter like ice. The wind howled through the jagged peaks of the Silverfang Mountains, carrying the scent of pine and regret as Elara stumbled through the snowdrifts. Her bare feet bled into the white expanse, each step a crimson imprint that the blizzard eagerly devoured. At 25, she was no longer the hopeful Omega of the Ironclaw pack. She was a ghost, cast out by the very kin who had once sworn to protect her. The rejection had come swiftly, under the full moon's merciless gaze, when her alpha Thorn declared her barren, a curse in a world where bloodlines were the currency of power. "You carry no future," he had growled, his eyes cold as the steel of his crown. While the pack watched in silence, their loyalty a fragile thing eroded by whispers of weakness. Elara's breath came in ragged gasps, the chill seeping into her bones like the ache of betrayal. She clutched the necklace at her throat, its silver chain warm against her frozen skin despite the storm. It was an heirloom from her mother, a simple locket etched with lunar phases. But now it bore a stain, a drop of her own blood from the ritual marking of her exile. The pack elder had sliced her palm, letting the red essence mingle with the snow at the pack's border, sealing her fate. "Blood calls to blood," he had intoned, "but yours calls to nothing now." The locket, once a symbol of maternal love, had caught that droplet as it fell, trapping it forever in its clasp. She pressed it to her lips, tasting salt and iron, a reminder that she was alive, even if unwanted. The forest loomed ahead, a labyrinth of ancient evergreens bowed under the weight of winter. Elara had fled under cover of night, the howls of the pursuing wolves fading into the gale. Not that they hunted to kill, Thorn's mercy extended only to banishment, a slow death by exposure rather than the swift mercy of fangs. She wrapped her tattered cloak tighter, the fabric torn from her desperate climb over the ridge. The moon hung low, its silver light painting the world in shades of ghost and shadow, illuminating the path she could scarcely see. Her body screamed for rest, but stopping meant surrender to the cold, to the despair that clawed at her mind like a feral beast. Memories flooded her as she pressed on, each one a thorn in her heart. She had been promised to Thorn since her first heat, an omega of quiet strength, her empathy a gift that soothed the pack's rages. But seasons passed without Pups, and doubt festered into accusation. "The goddess has forsaken you," the betas murmured, their eyes averted. Elara had begged, pleaded with the spirits in the lunar temple, offering prayers under the sacred oaks. Yet the moon remained silent, her womb empty, her place revoked. Now, alone in the wilds, she wondered if the divine indifference was her true curse. What strength was there in survival, if it led only to solitude? The snow deepened, swallowing her ankles, then her knees. A distant weevo pierced the night, a lone wolf perhaps, or the echo of her own grief. Elara collapsed against a boulder, its surface slick with ice, and fumbled with the locket. Inside, a faded portrait of her mother stared back, eyes wise and weary. "Blood endures," her mother had said before the fever claimed her, pressing the necklace into Elara's hands. But endurance felt like torment now, the metallic tang of blood on her tongue a bitter sacrament. She traced the stain with trembling fingers, feeling the pulse of her vein beneath, alive against the deathly quiet. As the storm raged, visions teased the edges of her exhaustion. She imagined the pack's hearth fires roaring in the great hall where Thorn would toast his new mate, a fertile she-wolf from the eastern clans, her belly already swelling with promise. Elara's chest tightened, not with jealousy, but with the hollow ache of erasure. She had been their healer, binding wounds with herbs and whispers, yet they left her to bleed out in the wild. The wind whipped her hair across her face, carrying flakes that stung like accusations. Was this the goddess's test? To strip her bare, Force her to confront the fragility of her spirit? Pushing onward, Alara crested a ridge, the valley below shrouded in mist. Far in the distance, the faint glow of torchlight flickered, perhaps a wanderer's camp or the illusion of hope. Her legs burned, but she descended, the snow giving way to a frozen stream. She knelt to drink, the water like liquid fire against her parched throat. The locket swung free, catching the moonlight, its bloodied heart gleaming like a forbidden omen. In that moment, a strange warmth bloomed within her, not from the drink, but from deep in her core, a whisper of something ancient stirring like embers under ash. The night deepened, the moon climbing higher, casting long shadows that danced like specters. Alara followed the stream, her senses sharpening against the cold. The air hummed with unseen life, the crack of branches under hidden paws, the rustle of prey in the underbrush. She was no warrior, but survival had awakened a primal vigilance. The necklace bounced against her chest, a talisman of endurance, its stain a vow she refused to break. Hours blurred into a haze of white and silver, until the trees thinned, revealing a cavern mouth yawning like a wound in the mountainside. Shelter, at last. Alara crawled inside, the stone floor echoing her labored breaths. Curling into a ball, she held the locket close, its bloodied secret pressing into her skin. Sleep came fitfully, haunted by dreams of howling winds and eyes that watched from the dark. Outside, the storm whispered promises of trials yet to come, the moon bearing witness to an Omega's unyielding spark. In the depths of that frozen exile, Alara clung to the fragile thread of her life, unaware that the blood in her locket pulsed with a destiny far beyond rejection's grasp. The cavern's chill wrapped around Alara like a shroud, the stone walls echoing the distant rumble of the storm outside. She stirred from her fitful sleep, the locket's weight a constant anchor against her chest, its bloodied clasp pressing into her skin like a half-remembered wound. Dawn had not yet broken, but a sliver of pale light pierced the entrance, carrying the scent of smoke and something sharper, blood, fresh and metallic, mingling with the pine-laced wind. Her heart quickened, instincts honed by exile urging her to stillness. She was no prey to be caught unawares, not after the pack's betrayal had stripped her of illusions. A low growl reverberated through the air, followed by the crunch of snow under heavy boots. Alara pressed herself deeper into the shadows, her breath shallow, fingers curling around a loose rock for defense. The figure that stumbled into the cavern was no mere wanderer. He was a storm incarnate, broad-shouldered and cloaked in a mantle torn by thorns and fangs, his silver-streaked hair matted with frost and sweat. At 50 winters, King Alaric of the Frostvale realm bore the marks of a life forged in fire and frost, scars etching his jaw like ancient runes, eyes the color of storm clouds, shadowed by a guilt that aged him beyond his years. He collapsed against the opposite wall, his massive frame shuddering as he clutched a gash across his ribs, crimson seeping through the bandages hastily wrapped in flight. Ilara's pulse thundered in her ears, a primal pull tugging at her core, unbidden and fierce. It was the scent of him, earth and iron, laced with the wild essence of an alpha unbound, that stirred it, a recognition deeper than words, like the moon calling to the tide. But fear clamped down hard. She had learned the peril of such bonds, the way they twisted into rejection's blade. Thorn's dismissal still burned fresh, a hollow in her soul where trust had withered. This stranger, this king in exile, could only bring more ruin. Yet curiosity flickered, a spark against the dark. Why did his pain echo her own, like a howl across the peaks? He lifted his head, nostrils flaring as he scented the air. His gaze locked onto her hiding place, piercing the gloom with an intensity that made her breath catch. "Show yourself," he rasped, voice gravel-rough from exertion, laced with the authority of one who commanded realms, yet now fled his own. There was no threat in it, only weariness, a plea masked as command. Ilara hesitated, the rock slipping from her grasp, clattering softly. She emerged slowly, her tattered cloak falling open to reveal the locket, its stained silver catching the faint light like a drop of captured sunset. Alaric's eyes widened fractionally, not in alarm, but in something akin to reverence. Or was it recognition? He pushed himself upright, wincing as blood welled anew from his wound. "An omega," he murmured, more to himself than to her, his tone laced with melancholy. "In this forsaken place." He did not advance, respecting the invisible barrier of her fear, but the air between them thickened, charged with an instinctive draw that neither could ignore. Ilara felt it in her veins, a warmth uncoiling despite the cold, urging her toward him as if her blood sang in harmony with his. The locket pulsed against her skin, the dried blood within seeming to throb, a silent witness to this unforeseen convergence. "Who are you?" she whispered, her voice steady despite the tremor in her limbs. She stepped closer, compelled by that curiosity, the need to understand this broken king who mirrored her exile. Alaric's laugh was bitter, echoing off the walls like cracking ice. "A fool who thought duty could outrun destiny," he replied, his gaze drifting to the wound at his side. "My name is Alaric, once king of Frostvale, now hunted by my own blood." He gestured vaguely to the storm beyond, where Weavos carried on the wind, not wolves, but the baying of his grown pups, his heirs, who had staged their coup under the cover of night. At 50, he had met his fated mate in dreams whispered by the goddess, a vision of healing amid his endless wars. But his children, fierce and ambitious, saw only threat in this late bond, a dilution of their power, a weakness in their father's armored heart. They had ambushed him at the lunar temple, blades drawn not to kill, but to chain, forcing him to flee into the wilds, lest he drag the realm into civil war. Ilara's empathy surged, unbidden, drawing her nearer. She knelt before him, the snow-damp floor numbing her knees, and examined the gash without touch. "Your sons," she said softly, piecing the fragments of his pain. "They fear what you might become." Alaric nodded, his eyes meeting hers, and in that gaze, the connection deepened, a flash of shared isolation, guilt's heavy crown. He was marked by it, the weight of pups raised in shadow, heirs who viewed love as betrayal to the throne. Yet he resisted the pull, rationalizing it as delirium from blood loss. "Fated or not, I bring only peril," he warned, voice low, turning his face away. "Run from me, as all should." But Ilara did not flee. The locket's warmth spread through her, a counterpoint to the cavern's bite, stirring questions she dared not voice. Fear warred with the instinctive urge to bind his wound, to offer the solace her rejected hands once gave freely. Outside, the wind howled in sympathy, whipping snow into the entrance like veils of forgotten oaths. The moon's echo lingered in the light, casting their shadows long and entwined, hinting at a refuge yet to be forged from this fragile encounter. As the storm raged on, Ilara tore a strip from her cloak, pressing it gently to his side, their breaths mingling in the charged silence, a bond denied, yet inexorably forming amid the fear and the first stirrings of wonder. And now, I invite you to leave a trace of your presence in the comments. Tell us where in the world you're watching from and the exact hour you hear this story. We wish to know how far these northern confessions travel and at what moments of the night they find you. The cavern's shadows deepened as the storm outside swelled into a furious symphony, wind lashing the entrance like the claws of vengeful spirits. Ilara's fingers trembled against Alaric's wound, the makeshift bandage soaking through with his blood, warm and insistent against the chill that gnawed at her bones. She had not meant to touch him, not truly. Instinct had driven her, that same primal thread pulling her toward him despite the warnings screaming in her mind. His scent enveloped her now, rich with the musk of ancient forests and the sharp tang of iron, stirring something deep within, a warmth that bloomed like forbidden fire in her core. But she pushed it down, rationalizing it as mere survival's mercy, the Omega's curse to heal even those who might destroy her. Alaric's breath hitched as she pressed harder, his large hand covering hers for a fleeting moment, rough calluses grazing her skin like the whisper of fate. "You shouldn't," he murmured, his voice a low rumble that vibrated through the stone floor, eyes dark pools reflecting the faint moonlight filtering in. Guilt etched deeper lines into his face, the weight of his 50 years pressing like the crown he had fled. He was no young alpha, impulsive and unchained. He was a king tempered by wars and winters, his heart scarred by the pups he had raised, fierce heirs who now hunted him not out of hatred but out of fear for the realm's fragile peace. At 50, the goddess had unveiled his fated mate in a vision during the lunar rite, a promise of redemption amid the blood-soaked thrones. Yet his children, grown into warriors of unyielding ambition, saw only peril in this late awakening. A mating that would upend their inheritance, bind their father to an outsider, and weaken the Frostvale line. Ilara withdrew her hand slowly, the locket at her throat pulsing with an unnatural heat, the dried blood within seeming to stir like a living ember. She met his gaze, her own eyes, storm gray and shadowed by rejection, holding a quiet defiance. "And leave you to bleed out? The wilds take enough without my help." Her words carried the edge of her own exile, the Ironclaw Pack's dismissal still a fresh wound, Thorn's cold decree echoing in her solitude. She had been cast aside for bearing no pups, deemed worthless in a world where legacy was etched in blood and birth. Yet here, in this shared desperation, empathy flickered to life, bridging the chasm between their broken worlds. She rummaged in her satchel, pulling forth dried herbs scavenged from the forest edge, willow bark for pain, yarrow to staunch the flow, crushing them between her palms with practiced care. As she worked, the air grew heavier, charged with the scent of approaching peril. Distant uivos cut through the gale, not the wild cries of beasts, but the coordinated howls of a hunting party, Alaric's own blood, his sons and their loyal betas, closing in on the cavern's trail. He tensed, his body coiling like a spring despite the agony, nostrils flaring as he scented them on the wind. "They come," he growled, rising unsteadily to his feet, the mantle around his shoulders falling open to reveal the faded tattoos of Frostvale kings, swirling like frozen rivers across his chest. "My pups. They mean to bind me, drag me back to the Ice Citadel in chains, for the good of the realm, they claim." His voice cracked on the last word, guilt twisting like a blade, the father who had taught them strength now reaping its bitter harvest. Ilara's heart pounded, fear surging through her veins like ice water, but she did not cower. The locket's warmth spread, a steady counterpoint to the dread, urging her to stand with him. She had fled her own pack's betrayal. She would not abandon this stranger to his. "Then we hold," she said, her voice steady, though her hands shook as she helped him barricade the entrance with fallen boulders and her torn cloak. Together, they labored in the dim light, his strength ebbing but unyielding, her empathy forging a fragile alliance. As the first scouts crested the ridge outside, their shadows flickering against the snow, Alaric positioned himself at the cavern mouth, a low snarl building in his throat. Ilara stayed close, her senses sharpening, the ancient gift she had long suppressed stirring, a subtle pull, like threads of moonlight weaving through the air, revealing hidden paths and weaknesses in the encroaching foes. The assault came swift and merciless. Arrows whistled through the storm, one grazing Alaric's arm as he shielded her, drawing fresh blood that splattered the stone like accusatory stars. Ilara cried out, instinct guiding her hand to press against the new wound, but he shoved her back gently. "Stay low," he commanded, his body a barrier of muscle and resolve. Yet in that moment, their eyes locked again, and something shifted, fear giving way to trust, the instinctive bond deepening into a shared fire. She nodded, scrambling to the side, her mind racing with visions. The sons' faces, twisted by duty's cruel mask, their blades gleaming under torchlight. One beta lunged through the narrowing gap, fangs bared, but Alaric met him with a roar that shook the cavern, tackling the intruder into the snow with raw power born of desperation. Alara moved then, her rejected spirit igniting. She hurled a rock with surprising force, striking the beta's flank, buying Alaric precious seconds. The air thrummed with chaos, clashing steel, grunts of pain, the metallic scent of blood mingling with the storm's fury. Outside, the moon hung high, its silver gaze illuminating the fray like a divine arbiter, casting long shadows that danced with the flames of the hunters' torches. Alaric fought not with the rage of youth, but with the melancholy precision of experience, disarming rather than killing, his every blow tempered by paternal sorrow. "Eldrick, stand down!" he bellowed into the night, voice cracking over the wind, naming his eldest son who led the charge. But the reply was only a howl of defiance, the Coup's momentum unyielding. In the heart of the skirmish, Ilara felt the locket burn against her skin, the blood within awakening a hidden strength. She whispered an old Omega's prayer to the goddess, her hands glowing faintly with ethereal light, mending Alaric's gashes even as he bled for her. Empathy transformed in that crucible, weaving their fates tighter, his guilt finding solace in her quiet resolve, her isolation easing in his protective shadow. They repelled the first wave, the intruders retreating into the blizzard with curses and wounds, but the respite was fleeting. Panting, Alaric slumped beside her, their shoulders touching in the aftermath, breaths sinking like the tide under lunar pull. As silence fell, broken only by the wind's mournful sigh, Alara traced the fresh scar on his arm, her touch lingering. "Why fight for a realm that chains you?" she asked softly, the question a mirror to her own soul's turmoil. Alaric turned to her, his eyes softening, the bond no longer denied but acknowledged in the quiet. "Because redemption lies not in crowns, but in choices," he replied, his hand brushing hers, igniting sparks amid the cold. The locket's blood pulsed in rhythm with their hearts, a symbol of wounds shared and healing begun, as the storm whispered of trials yet to unfold. Yet in that fragile refuge, as distant Weavos faded into the night, Alara wondered if this union was salvation or the spark of greater war, a dilemma of the spirit, where love demanded sacrifice from souls already scarred. The cavern's air hung thick with the aftermath of battle, a metallic haze of blood and frost that clung to Alara's skin like an unwanted vow. She sat beside Alaric, her back against the cold stone, the locket's chain a faint pressure against her collarbone, its bloodied heart now a quiet thrum in time with the slowing rhythm of their breaths. The storm outside had eased to a mournful whisper, snowflakes drifting in through the barricade like errant thoughts, settling on the wounds they had bound with strips of cloak and herb poultices. Alaric's chest rose and fell steadily now, the gash across his ribs staunched, though pain etched shadows under his eyes, eyes that lingered on her with a depth that stirred the embers of fear and longing she had tried to bury. Ilara traced the edge of the locket absent-mindedly, her fingers slick with the residue of his blood mingled with hers from an earlier cut. The warmth it emanated was no longer subtle. It pulsed like a second heartbeat, drawing her gaze inward, to the hidden chambers of her spirit where rejection had long silenced any whisper of power. She had always sensed it, this latent gift, the Omega's veil, a subtle sight that revealed paths unseen, fates woven like threads of moonlight through the chaos of the world. But the Ironclaw pack had dismissed it as whimsy, a barren woman's delusion, unworthy of their warrior creed. Thorn's rejection had sealed it away, leaving her adrift in doubt. Yet now, in this shared exile, as Alaric's presence filled the space like the scent of earth after rain, something stirred, a revelation uncoiling from the depths, insistent as the moon's pull on the tide. He shifted closer, his massive frame careful not to crowd her, the guilt in his posture a visible weight. At 50, Alaric carried the scars of a reign built on reluctant conquests. His Pups' Coup a mirror to his own failures as a father, teaching them the iron laws of survival, only to watch them turn those lessons against him. The vision of his fated mate had come too late, a divine jest amid the endless duties, promising healing he dared not claim. "You saved me tonight," he said softly, his voice a gravelly timbre that resonated through the stone, breaking the silence like a crack in ice. "Not just my body, but something more." His hand hovered near hers, not touching, but the air between them crackled with unspoken recognition, the instinctive bond now a bridge rather than a chain. Alara met his gaze, her storm-gray eyes reflecting the faint glow of a torch she had kindled from scavenged wood, its flames dancing shadows across his weathered face. The light caught the silver in his hair, turning it to threads of frost, and in that moment, the world blurred at the edges. A vision seized her, unbidden and vivid, paths forking through the Silverfang Mountains like veins of silver ore, one leading to the Frostvale Citadel where his sons plotted in torchlit halls, their faces twisted by ambition's cruel logic. Eldric, the eldest, gripping a blade etched with the family crest, whispering of necessary sacrifices. Another path veered into shadowed valleys, hidden by ancient wards where allies long forgotten stirred under the moon's call. And woven through it all, a golden thread binding Alaric to her, pulsing with the locket's rhythm, revealing her as the key, the pathfinder, whose sight could unravel the Coup's knots and guide him to redemption or ruin. She gasped, the vision fading like mist under dawn, leaving her trembling, the locket burning hot against her chest. Blood from its clasp seeped anew, a single drop tracing her skin like a tear, symbolizing the wounds that bound them. "I saw paths," she whispered, her voice laced with awe and terror, the words tumbling out as if pulled by the goddess's own hand. "Your sons, they march not from hatred, but from a fear deeper than steel. They believe your mating would fracture the realm, invite rivals from the eastern packs to claim the throne. But there's a way through the shadows, a hidden trail to the lunar temple where oaths can be remade." Her hands glowed faintly, ethereal light weaving between her fingers, illuminating the cavern in soft silver, mending a lingering tear in Alaric's arm with a warmth that spread like liquid moonlight. Alaric's breath caught, his eyes widening as the truth dawned, the melancholy in his soul lifting like fog before the sun. He had sought signs from the goddess for years, offering blood and prayer at altars of ice, but received only silence, until now, until her. "You are the one," he murmured. Reverence threading his tone, his hand finally closing over hers, calloused fingers gentle against her skin. The contact ignited a surge, the bond flaring bright in his senses, confirming what instinct had whispered. She was his fated, the Omega, whose hidden gift unlocked the destiny he had doubted. Not a reward for his trials, but a trial in itself, a chance to choose love over legacy, compassion over conquest. Guilt warred in his chest, the father's heart aching for the pups he had shaped into betrayers, yet her sight offered mercy's crown, a path where war might yield to understanding. Alara pulled back slightly, the revelation's weight pressing on her like the mountains themselves. Her own past echoed in the vision. Thorn's rejection, a smaller coup of the heart, deeming her gift worthless, her womb empty of heirs. Was this power a blessing or a curse, drawing her into a king's turmoil when solitude had been her exile's solace? The locket cooled, the blood drop freezing into a crimson jewel against her throat, a symbol of truths revealed and fates entwined. Outside, the moon crested the peaks, its light spilling into the cavern like spilled silver, bathing them in an otherworldly glow. Weavos rose again, distant but insistent, the hunters regrouping, their torches flickering like predatory eyes in the night. Alaric rose, pulling her with him, his resolve hardening into quiet strength. "If you are the key, then I am the lock that yields," he said, his voice steady, eyes locking onto hers with a depth that pierced her defenses. The air hummed with possibility, the fire's crackle underscoring the spiritual hum of their union, a redemption not easily won, but glimpsed in her gift's light. Yet as they prepared to move, Elara felt the dilemma coil in her spirit. To guide him was to embrace a destiny that demanded her heart's sacrifice, weaving her rejected life into his fractured throne. What was freedom, if not the choice to heal another at the cost of one's own shadows? In that lunar revelation, amid the scent of blood and blooming hope, Elara stood at the threshold of her power, the locket's blood a testament to wounds that might yet forge unbreakable bonds or shatter them anew, like if you believe rejection can become destiny. The moon's silver sickle hung low over the silver fang crests, casting the world below in fractured light and elongated shadows, as if the goddess herself mourned the fractures in mortal bonds. Elara moved through the hidden trail her vision had unveiled, the snow crunching softly under her boots, each step a deliberate weave through the wards of ancient oaks that guarded the path to the lunar temple. Alaric walked beside her, his presence a steady heat against the biting wind, his wounds mended by her gift, but his spirit still shadowed by the weight of impending reckoning. The locket at her throat thrummed like a caged heartbeat, the bloodied drop within now a frozen ruby that caught the moonlight, refracting it into crimson flecks across the frost-kissed ground, a symbol of the past's unyielding claim, demanding confrontation before any dawn could break. They had fled the cavern at twilight, the distant uivos of Alaric's sons growing bolder, a chorus of familial betrayal laced with the urgency of hunters closing on wounded prey. Elara's sight had guided them true, illuminating the veiled route like threads of liquid silver amid the blizzard's veil, but doubt gnawed at her core. This power, long dormant in the wake of her rejection, felt less like salvation and more like a siren's call, drawing her deeper into a king's turmoil when her own exile yearned for quiet erasure. Alaric's guilt mirrored her own. His pups, raised in the forge of Frostvale's endless skirmishes, had turned against him not from malice, but from the very lessons of survival he had instilled. At 50, his fated bond to her promised redemption, yet it threatened to unravel the realm he had bled for, pitting love against the throne's cold iron demands. The temple loomed ahead, its spires of glacial ice rising like frozen prayers, etched with lunar runes that glowed faintly under the night sky. Torches flickered at its base, not the warm hearths of sanctuary, but the harsh flames of confrontation. Alaric's sons had anticipated this pilgrimage, their coup evolving into a blockade under the moon's watchful eye. Eldric, the eldest, stood at the forefront, his frame an echo of his father's in youth, broad and unyielding, clad in armor chased with silver wolves, his eyes burning with a mix of filial devotion and ruthless resolve. Flanking him were his siblings, 2 brothers and a sister, all marked by the Frostvale scars, and a cadre of betas, their breaths steaming in the frigid air like accusations unspoken. Beyond them, shadows stirred, emissaries from rival packs, the Ironclaw among them, drawn by whispers of weakness in the Frostvale line, their alphas circling like scavengers scenting blood. Alara's breath caught as Thorn emerged from the throng, his familiar silhouette a blade to her heart. Tall and stern, his rejection still a fresh scar beneath her resolve. He had allied with Eldric, trading Ironclaw loyalty for promises of expanded borders, deeming Alaric's late mating a folly that invited chaos. "Traitor to your own blood," Alaric growled low, halting at the temple's threshold, his body tensing into a protective stance before her. The air thickened with the scents of fur and steel, pine, and impending violence, the wind carrying weavos that twisted into war cries. Ilara's hand instinctively touched the locket, its warmth surging like a warning, visions flashing. Forks in fate where forgiveness might mend the fractures, or war could shatter them irreparably. Eldrick stepped forward, his blade half drawn, the family crest glinting, a snarling wolf under crossed thorns. "Father, this ends here," he said, voice steady but laced with pain, eyes flicking to Ilara with wary disdain. "You've ruled with iron for decades, forging peace through strength. Now you chase a fated dream that weakens us all? An Omega exile, barren and unknown. She'll bear no heirs, only division. The Eastern rivals gather. Ironclaw's Alpha offers alliance if we bind you, secure the line without this distraction." His words struck like arrows, echoing Thorn's old decree against her, the pack's judgment of worthlessness reborn in this frozen standoff. Alaric's face hardened, guilt flashing in his storm cloud eyes. The father who had taught them power's cost now faced its backlash, his pups viewing love as betrayal, freedom as folly. Ilara felt the pull of her gift intensify, moonlight weaving through her veins, revealing the hidden truths. Eldrick's resolve masked a deeper fear, the loss of a father to a bond that excluded them. Thorn's alliance hid his own regrets, the empty throne of his heart since casting her out. She stepped forward, her voice cutting through the tension like a blade of ice. "Strength is not in chains or crowns," she said, her tone steady, drawing from the philosophy that had sustained her exile. "It is in choosing mercy over the blade, forgiveness over the endless war of bloodlines." The words hung in the air, a challenge to the moral crossroads before them. Alaric's hand brushed hers, a silent anchor, his melancholy gaze urging her on, the bond between them a quiet fire amid the cold, resisting the urge to claim her outright, rationalizing it as duty's test. Chaos erupted then, visceral and swift. A rival beta lunged from the shadows, fangs bared, aiming for Alaric's flank. But Ilara's sight flared, guiding her to shove him aside, her body a shield in the fray. Claws raked the air, blood spraying across the snow in arcs of deep red, mirroring the locket's stain. Alaric roared, disarming his attacker with a blow tempered by sorrow, not slaughter. His ethic unyielding, even as Thorn charged, eyes locked on her with a mix of rage and unresolved longing. "You were nothing then," he snarled, blade whistling toward her, "and you're a fool to meddle now." She dodged, the wind whipping her cloak like wings, her gift illuminating his strike's arc, allowing Alaric to intercept with a clash of steel that echoed off the ice spires. The battle unfolded in cinematic fury, torches sputtering in the snow, weavos blending with grunts of pain, the moon bathing the melee in ethereal silver. Ilara wove through it, her hands glowing as she mended a gash on Alaric's shoulder mid-stride, empathy forging her into more than victim, a force of revelation, urging his sons to see the paths beyond ambition. Eldrick hesitated, blade faltering as her light touched him, revealing visions of a realm healed by unity, not conquest. Yet Thorn pressed on, a traitor to her past and present, his strike grazing her arm, drawing blood that welled hot and fell to the snow, absorbed by the locket's chain like an offering. Alaric felled Thorn with a paternal mercy, a strike to subdue, not kill, binding him in ropes of woven moonlight from Ilara's gift. The rivals scattered into the night, their alliance crumbling under the temple's spiritual weight. But Eldrick stood firm, tears freezing on his cheeks. "Choose, Father," he pleaded, voice breaking. "Us, the realm, or her?" The question pierced Ilara's soul, a moral crucible. Love demanded she step back, grant Alaric freedom to reclaim his pups and throne, or claim the bond, risking war's full bloom. Alaric turned to her, his hand cupping her face, thumb tracing the fresh blood on her skin, eyes reflecting the locket's crimson glow. "What is power?" If not the mercy to forgive those who wound us deepest, he whispered, the philosophy a balm to her turmoil. In that suspended moment, as the wind howled laments and the moon witnessed their crossroads, Alara faced the judgment of her heart, love or liberty, the redemption of union against the solitude of release, a spiritual dilemma where every choice bled into the eternal dance of forgiveness and fate. The locket pulsed, its blood a vow unspoken, as the temple's runes ignited, demanding resolution from souls teetering on war's precipice. The temple's glacial spires pierced the night like frozen spears of judgment, their runes pulsing with an inner fire that mirrored the turmoil churning in Alara's chest. Blood trickled warm from the graze on her arm, seeping into the snow at her feet, where it mingled with the crimson echoes of the fray, drops frozen mid-fall, like the tears of the goddess herself. Alaric's hand lingered on her face, his thumb smearing the wound's essence across her cheek, a mark of shared sacrifice that bound them deeper than any ritual vow. Around them, the melee had stilled into a tense tableau. Eldric's blade lowered but unyielding, his siblings frozen in the torchlight's wavering glow, their breaths steaming like the sighs of conflicted souls. Thorn lay bound at the temple's base, his eyes locked on Alara with a hatred laced by the bitter regret of paths untaken, while the rival shadows retreated into the blizzard, their howls dissolving into the wind's lament. Alara's heart thundered, the locket's frozen ruby burning against her skin like a brand of destiny's inexorable claim. Visions swirled at the edges of her sight, forks in the lunar weave, where Alaric's choice could crown mercy or unleash war's red tide. To step into this bond was to embrace union, healing the fractures of rejection in her soul, but at what cost? His pups stood as living wounds, their Coup a testament to the throne's devouring hunger, demanding he sever the fated thread to reclaim them. Freedom whispered to her still, the exile's quiet allure. Release him to his blood, retreat to the wilds where no heart could be broken anew. Yet the pull was visceral, a tide of empathy and fire that rationalized away her fears. Love not as reward, but as the ultimate proof, a redemption forged in the crucible of choice. Alaric's gaze held hers, storm-cloud eyes reflecting the moon's fractured light, his melancholy etched in the lines of a face weathered by 50 winters of duty's unyielding grip. "Eldric," he called, voice resonant and raw, cutting through the frozen air like a howl across the peaks. His sons tensed, the eldest stepping closer, armor creaking under the weight of unresolved filial fire. "You hunt me not for betrayal, but for the fear I planted in your hearts, the belief that love weakens the crown." He gestured to Alara, his hand dropping to clasp hers, calluses rough against her palm, igniting sparks that traveled her veins like liquid moonlight. "But what is a king's strength if it chains his spirit? I taught you power through conquest, yet the goddess reveals another path, compassion as the true blade, forgiveness, the forge that tempers legacy." Eldric's face crumpled, the warrior's mask cracking under the onslaught of paternal truth, tears carving paths through the frost on his cheeks. "And her?" he demanded, voice breaking like ice under pressure, nodding toward Alara with a mix of suspicion and dawning awe. "An Omega cast out, barren as the winter wastes, what heirs does she bring but ruin?" The words stung, echoing Thorn's old venom. But Alara stood taller, her gift flaring in response, a soft glow emanating from her hands, weaving silver threads through the air that touched each sun, revealing glimpses of futures unbound, realms healed by unity, where bloodlines bloomed not from wombs alone, but from bonds reforged in mercy's light. She felt the locket pulse in harmony, the frozen blood within thawing into a warm rivulet that traced her collarbone, symbolizing the rebirth of wounds long sealed. "I bring no heirs of flesh," Alara said, her tone steady, intimate with the poetry of her awakened spirit, "but paths to mend what war has torn. Your father's guilt is his deepest scar, Let me be the salve, not the wound. The wind rose then, carrying uivos from the distant ridges, wild wolves bearing witness, their cries a spiritual chorus urging resolution. Alaric nodded, turning to his heir with the quiet authority of one who had glimpsed redemption's edge. I choose her, not to abandon you, but to show you freedom's cost. The throne will be yours, Eldric, but shared in council, with mercy as its law. Bind me no longer, let us heal as kin. The choice hung suspended, a moral precipice where sacrifice met union. Eldric hesitated, blade trembling, then sheathed it with a sob that echoed off the spires, his siblings following in a wave of reluctant surrender. Thorn snarled from his bonds, but Alara's sight guided Alaric to cut him free, not with death, but with words of exile's mercy. Return to Ironclaw, and remember, rejection sows only thorns. The Alpha slunk away into the night, a shadow diminished, leaving the temple to the family's fractured light. As dawn's first blush bled across the horizon, painting the snow in hues of rose and gold, Alaric drew Alara into his arms, their bond sealing under the waning moon's benediction. No immediate blaze of passion, but a slow unfurling, his lips brushing her forehead, tasting the salt of her trials, her hands tracing the scars on his chest, empathy mending the guilt that had long festered. The locket cooled against them, its ruby now a flawless gem, emblem of rebirth, blood endured, transformed from curse to crown. They stood amid the temple's glow, the suns kneeling in tentative fealty, the realm's fractures beginning to knit under the promise of compassionate rule. Alara felt the weight lift, her rejection alchemized into purpose, not barren, but bearer of destinies unseen, her womb perhaps forever empty, yet her spirit fertile with healing's quiet power. Yet in that embrace, as the wind sighed forgiveness and the first birdsong pierced the silence, a spiritual whisper lingered. Redemption was no ending, but a perpetual choice where love demanded vigilance against the shadows of old wounds. Alaric's pups rose, eyes reflecting a newfound light. The Coup dissolved into alliance, the Frostvale line reborn not in conquest, but in the mercy of a fated union. Alara leaned into him, the scent of pine and iron enveloping her, the moon fading as the sun claimed the sky. A testament to trials transcended, where every Omega's exile could illuminate a king's hidden dawn. If your heart beat alongside ours, like, comment, and subscribe. Because every soul that joins our moon keeps the flame of redemption alive.